Hey, Justin Dorfman. So great to have you here. You've always been a great supporter of mine, and it's a privilege to have you in my corner. And I'm so happy to have you with me today to ask you a few questions about how you and your organization thinks about creative brand and design. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, and, great to be here. Always happy to help and excited for a fun conversation.
Amazing. When I met you, which was a long time ago, let's not say how long. You were VP of marketing at a startup in San Francisco. You actually work with Evie, who I interviewed before a week back. So I hope you caught or will catch the interview. That was a fun one too. We talked about her adventures at Apex School Labs. After that a tracker, you became product marketing lead at blockchain.com. And then after that, why did you do that to yourself? You became a startup founder, and now you're a CEO at AssetMule. AssetMule is a web tool that replaces static sales PDF with web-based sales assets that can be tracked, personalized, and can be created in minutes, basically saving people in sales a lot of time and back and forth and time spent into building presentations and document that end up looking terrible too. And I'm telling you, and I'm speaking out of experience. You recently launched a new update to your product that's called Follow Up for AssetMule, that's basically getting people like me out of a job because it generates interactive digital assets beautifully designed and laid out from call transcripts. Is that right? In a few minutes, so that it's basically cutting off a whole workflow for it's automating a whole part of the sales workflow. But now I'll leave the words for you. Tell me more about what's a day in your life looking like. What is it that you
Yeah,
do?
yeah, I know that was a great background. I don't know if I have too much more to add, but yeah, been in the startup game for about 15 years now, both on the sales and the product marketing side. And now as a founder, just trying to solve some pain points that I experienced myself. First as a salesperson, trying to get the right sales assets to send to prospects. We always have a library of one pagers and decks and case studies and things that we can use, but traditionally they haven't been personalized for the specific prospect that we're sending them to, right? The problems that they talk about, the use cases they talk about, the features that they talk about are more generalized across a broader target audience. So the goal with AssetMule has always been to help salespeople deliver the right story in terms of sales assets to a buyer, and for the buyer to get the information they need to determine if this is the right product for them. On the product marketing side, I experienced that problem from the other side of the coin, right? I was the product marketer that sales was always pinging to say, "Hey, do we have a one pager on this, or do we have a competitive page for this competitor?" So the idea was to make it to really bridge that gap between the two, and make that a seamless process. Now, in our journey along the way, this thing called AI emerged that kind of
Mhm.
shifted the ground underneath us, if you will. So AssetMule is still a product that, although it's very intuitive, easy to use, it's a more manual process of building these templates. We have templates that you can use. We have these components that you can drag and drop just to assemble your sales assets, but that process was more manual, right? When AI started to really take off, it was starting to take off when we launched AssetMule, but I think, let's say in the last year, it's really advanced, right? We saw a shift in user behavior. Users no longer wanted to use products to do a job. They wanted to use a product so that the job was done for them by the product, right? So the idea of follow-up came from identifying one of our most common use cases in AssetMule, which was building a follow-up asset, an asset that you send after the demo that basically says, "Hey, these are the problems that I heard you're trying to solve, and this is how we can help you solve it. And here's all the social proof." And automatically generating it based on a call transcript, right? Now, we had this AI that could do the auto generation, and all we needed was the input, the information, the context to be able to generate it. And as we know, there's all these great call recording and note-taking tools now. So that was the idea of Follow Up. We launched it about 4 months ago. And yeah, now we're managing sort of two products and figuring out, like, how do we put these things together? How do we cross sell across them and all that good stuff that comes with the next phase. But that's been the journey maybe for the last 2 years or so. Yeah.
Okay. How do 2 years feel in the startup years?
It's interesting. It feels both long and short. And I think that's the case with a lot of things in life, right? In the long side of things, man, it's a journey, right? It's never a linear path. There's been a lot of, micro pivots, I would say, and then followed by this new product launch and all that stuff. There's been a lot of, dead ends that we had to work around, and then like next levels and all kinds of stuff like that. So with that, it feels very long, right? At the same time, we're still in the early stages. I would say the first inning, right? Trying to figure out what this product should be and for who, and, how to speak to it, the stories to tell, and all these things. So it's still very much so in the early innings. And especially with this new AI layer, I think like the game is just changing so much every day, right? In terms of what solutions are available on the market, both that we're competing with or competing for attention against, but also for us to use in our own right? To like build the product and, get the messaging out there. Like, I'll give you an example. When we
Yes,
were first building
please.
AssetMule, there was no AI coding tools, right? And that product, AssetMule, took, 2 years. We had customers along the way. We're definitely believers in getting it out there early, getting feedback, iterating. But like to get to the product where it is today, a relatively complete product, took a good year and a half, 2 years, right? Launching follow up took a fraction of that time because now we had all these AI tools that we're not using to fully develop the product, but definitely like bug fixes, integrations, like, these sort of things can be sped up dramatically with these AI coding tools, right? So code assistants and so on. So, in that sense, it feels like we're in the early innings of this story. So we'll see how I feel in another 2 years.
Yes, yes, yes. I completely understand. Like, I think back on some projects that have um, one specific project. I won't get into the details, but it ended like right on the cusp of AI exploding, and it turned into, now I don't want to say nothing, pretty. It's pretty low compared to the expectations. If that just happened to start, it was the only time in startup land that it would have been better to be later rather than earlier, like on the cusp of the AI explosion, right?
Yeah, I feel like 2.5 years ago when we launched, in a way, was a very challenging time to launch because things were just about to change. At the same time, though, when I'm talking to other founders that have products that are 10, 15 years old, right? They have a harder time disrupting themselves. You know what I mean? Because they have so much at stake. They have millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions of dollars in revenue. They have thousands of customers. They have partners. They have investors and all these things. So the other thing was, on the other side of the coin, being just 2.5 years in with AssetMule, I felt it was an easy decision to launch another product that could potentially disrupt the original product, though the way we're thinking about it now is more an integration and a workflow between the two. But it was a lot easier to do because we had less at stake. So I think there's both sides of the coin, like many things, right? It was good and it was a bad time at the same time to be launching.
Yeah, yeah, as it usually is, right? So, how are you currently measuring success? Like, what have been AssetMule's achievements so far? Is there anything that you're particularly proud of? Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Taking a step back, I think building anything that people will use, and not just once, right? Use every day and are willing to pay for, is a big achievement, right? So I'm proud. I'm very proud that we've built two products that actually people, use, they love, they rave to, coworkers, friends. We get a lot of, viral, I guess, growth from, these are assets that people are sending to people. So it's really cool. My favorite sort of customer acquisition or like sale is when somebody starts using AssetMule or follow up, and I ask them like, "Hey, where did you hear about us?" And they're like, "Oh, I received one of these, right, from somebody else." So anytime you have a product that has that much value, I guess that people are willing to share it, willing to pay for it, willing to talk about it and rave about it, I think that's awesome. And that's like a huge thing. I think in terms of milestones, the follow-up product and launching that, and it was a tough decision, right? Like to say, you know what, like we've been working on this AssetMule product for 2.5 years. Let's take a breather and launch this new thing because we see where the puck is going, and we want to skate to where the puck is going, to use the hockey analogy here, right?
Okay, that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough decision to do that. And like as I said, a lot of founders that I know and that I speak to all the time that have these more legacy SaaS products, that's even harder for them. But I'm proud that we've stayed agile and we've been able to like launch that product, and that it's showing promise. And now that we actually have a vision of how these things can come together into a suite, right? Like our longer term vision is actually that AssetMule becomes this almost like holding company or like umbrella product with these micro apps within it that are all focused on generating different types of sales assets using AI, whether it be a follow-up asset or a digital sales room is what some people call the follow-up product, or it be a case study page, or a case study asset, or it be a competitive comparison asset. So it's really cool. And I think this is like something that we're really excited about, thinking of the future for how like the original idea of AssetMule will play out. It would just be in a very different form, right? Than we originally had envisioned. So in a way, it's exciting. It's fun to kind of pull on the thread and see where it takes you.
Really interesting. So in your future, what you're actively working towards right now is building this ecosystem up and turning AssetMule into this ecosystem. Are you already actively working toward that vision?
Yeah. So that vision started to form relatively recently, I'd say in the last 6 months, where, when we launched follow up, our thought was a lot, everybody's going to go and flock to follow up, and like, maybe they won't want to use AssetMule anymore because follow up is, faster time to value, immediate time to value, like does all the heavy lifting for you. But what we were surprised to find is that a lot of people are using both products, right? They're building these assets in AssetMule. They're building that like follow-up page with follow-up, and then they're curating the assets they build in AssetMule into follow-up, right? As we have this like additional resources section where, once you've generated this page that talks to the core business case and challenge and like has a demo video embedded in all that stuff.
It's kind of a
There's this
template, right?
Yeah, it's a template. There's additional resources section where you could like throughout the sales process, add some case studies in there, add, the ROI calculator page, or add, the competitive page if they're starting to look at a competitor. So you can start to like use it as this hub to curate relevant resources, to answer objections, remove friction across the sales process, and ultimately get them to a point where they're confident that this is the solution that they want to buy, right? That's sort of the idea of a digital sales room and what follow-up is. A lot of people don't have the case study to put in that page, or they, especially in the early stages, or they don't have the competitive page to put in there, or they don't have the proposal, or they need to build the proposal. So AssetMule is still highly relevant, is what we've found in this use case. And now if we could sort of bridge that gap where within AssetMule or within these micro apps that we envision building, you can sort of start to create them easily, right? Just as easily as you can create follow-up, and then start using follow-up as that distribution mechanism for sharing it with, and then tracking and getting all those insights. So now where we're at is we have the sort of like follow-up product, and now we're starting to think about, okay, how do we like bring this into maybe AssetMule? And then what's the next micro app that we launch? Like there's a lot of options here. Is it the one pager? Is it the case study? Is it the competitive page? And as we think about 2026, that's kind of likely where we go, is like thinking about what's the next micro app that we launch, and then how does it pull from the same core set of assets or resources that AssetMule becomes like the home for, right? The product images, the customer quotes, the demo videos, and all those things that feed into these assets that you generate. The cool thing is the name AssetMule makes sense for this product, right? Because if you think about AssetMule, it's like doing the heavy lifting of building these assets for you. This is maybe a
Yes.
less PG version of the name, but like you could think of like a drug mule that carries drugs across. Like this could be like the home for all the different assets in terms of videos and images and so on that then get pulled into the actual customer facing assets, which are the one pagers and the case studies and all that stuff. So it's cool how the name also makes sense. That was kind of just a thing
Yeah,
that we
the
started
people
to realize.
actually made it even more
Even more
compelling.
relevant. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
more
So
relevant and compelling.
yeah. So its short answer, I guess, is that the vision is there. Some of the pieces are there, right? And now it's all about kind of putting it together to make this vision a reality and testing that this is actually, what people want. Obviously, things change, you iterate, but this seems to be the direction that we're being pulled at the moment.
To help people put things in perspective, when you say we, what's the size of your company? What are you talking about? And however you define that.
Yeah, and this is another thing that I'm really proud of. You talk about like achievements, milestones, and so on, is we're a lean team, right? We're a team of 3. So, everybody that uses our products, that interacts with us online, views our content, is always so surprised to find that we're a team of 3. Again, based on the quality of what we're putting out there, but also based on the volume of what we're putting out there, especially on the marketing and the content side. And I would say also on the product side and the depth of the product and so on. So it's myself, right? Me. And I would say I play the role of product manager in a lot of ways and chief evangelist, I guess, if you will, mostly because I'm the persona that we're solving for. So I've lived in the shoes of our customer. So when it comes to working with our customers, understanding their needs and trying to translate that into features and workflows, that's kind of part of my role. And the other part of my role is telling the story externally. So on LinkedIn, we have a podcast, we have a newsletter, and we have a blog that we're producing content on, uh, engaging with sort of people in our target ICP and telling their stories and tying it to our story and the problems that we're trying to solve. That's really my role. My other co-founder is Dane, who you know very well. Dane
Of
is
course.
an incredibly talented full stack developer who's built both products from beginning to
And
end.
he wouldn't say this, but he's also a good designer. He wouldn't call himself a designer, but
Yeah, and I know that, the part of this discussion today is going to be based on,
yes,
I know you want to talk about how we're approaching design. I've been very fortunate in that I have 2 co-founders that actually have very good design eyes, right? They have design skills. They're not designers by nature, but they can actually bring a lot to the table when it comes to design. So Dana has actually, obviously there's a product design and making it intuitive, easy to use. These are a PLG product led products, right? There's freemium workflows or adoption flows here. So he's done an amazing job at sort of product design. He's also helped us a lot with our brand design. So the AssetMule brand, the logo, the colors, if you look at the website, all that stuff, Dane is a lot behind that. He likes that stuff and he has a knack for it. So he's really helped on that
yeah,
front.
he's
And my
great at it.
third co-founder is George. And George comes from similar background to mine in early stage startup sales and marketing, but in sort of the latter part of his career, really got into video and specifically podcasting, podcast editing, and that kind of stuff. So I'm very fortunate in that we have a podcast as a core part of our go-to-market strategy, is talking to people in the roles and using that as a way of producing video content and other content like our newsletter and so on. Man, George has been incredible in making it so that we don't have to outsource that and pay for it, which is something that in the future, obviously, we'd be willing to do. But as an early stage startup, if you can do that in house, it can be helpful, right? And save some costs. So that's what George has done. He's also a community guy, so everything around like content strategy, community strategy, and all that stuff, he's really leading the way. So we have a pretty nice skill set across the 3 of us where it covers a lot of these roles. I think the traditional sense, you have like a sales founder and a technical founder. You have like 3 guys that are multifaceted in a way that allow us to do a lot more with a lot less.
Yes, and you're doing an amazing job
I appreciate
for
it.
what it's worth. Yeah, I know Dame personally. I want to give a shout out to him again because yeah, he's a great designer. You look great online. You present yourself very well put together. You do use AI in the creation of your creatives. I remember Dane was already creating like coherent set of images for your marketing, like when I was still like banging on my keyboard trying to get anything useful out of all the AI models that were coming out at the beginning. So he's always ahead of the curve technologically too. So yeah, it's amazing what you can do with what you guys are able to do with such a lean operation. So my curiosity is, at this point, design is still a big piece of your product, because your product, it actually allows people to design, lay out documents.
Yep,
So
totally.
design is an integral part of what your product enables your user to do. So how do you see things changing in your design creative department, branding department in the future? How do you see this part of your organization developing in the future?
Yeah, so I think of design in a couple different facets when it comes to our business. There's brand design, so that's the AssetMule logo and colors and the imageries. Especially with AssetMule, we had a sort of mascot from the early days, Maverick,
Yes.
who's our like mule,
Yes.
humanized mule. And what's interesting is that's where Dane was in the early days playing around with AI, was generating
Yes, I remember.
these mule images. And it was interesting to see how they evolved over time. In the early days, every version that we created was kind of a different character, right? Like it looked different, and every so often you found like multiple ears and stuff like that. Like there's some weird stuff in there. But as AI advanced, it got better, and there was the ability to create consistent characters too. So that was kind of interesting. We've leaned less on that in the follow-up product, but in the AssetMule product, that was definitely a part of the brand. So there's the brand design, right? And like then there's the product design. And in that, there's actually two elements to that, right? So there's the fact that you pointed out, which is the output that we produce is a design product. So it's important that, we felt from the very beginning, it's important that these things look good and that they look professional. We're kind of lucky in a way that salespeople don't have the highest design standards. They want something that looks better than the slides that they put together or the Google sheet, the Word doc or whatever that they put together. But it doesn't need to be a Figma, Canva, or even more so, designed looking thing. It can be a little bit more basic. We relied a lot more on interactivity than pure design, I guess, polish. But I would say that's an area that, if I were to think about where we bring on external designers in the future, that was one that we've always talked about being an important part, because again, especially as our customers get more sophisticated in the designs that they want, there's a limit to, I think, where we can go on, on delivering that without maybe a full-on design expert, right? That's one piece that's really interesting. And then the final piece that I was going to mention is also product related, but that's product design in terms of ease of use,
User
time to
interface,
value,
user
user
experience.
interface, making it intuitive. And that's becoming an increasingly important part of our focus, because if you think about the shift from AssetMule to follow-up, and this is something, I just read an article on this recently by Kyle Poyer, who's a great person to follow on growth and product led and all that stuff.
Please share the link after the call so we can share it with the listeners.
I'll share the link. And it was
Yeah,
fascinating because you talk about Dane being one step ahead. I feel like this is an area where this is a great example. When we were building AssetMule, it was a standard sort of SaaS product where you go to the website, you read about the product, you then sign up for a free trial. It has a normal onboarding where like it takes you through some steps, and then has like, the product tour that shows you around. And then there's emails over the next week that kind of introduce you to different features. And then you start building your templates, and eventually like you get to value, right? And hopefully you get there in your first couple of days, couple of weeks, whatever, or first week, let's say, but there's a path to it. As AI emerged, Dane was pretty persistent on the fact that we should design this so that you get value immediately. In fact, you get it on our website. Right? You don't need to sign up for anything. You can actually experience the product.
You have a live walkthrough right on the homepage, right?
Well, not even a walkthrough. So if you go to gofollowup.ai,
it's actually the
right?
cool.
We have a prompt bar. Like that's our hero. Is like it's the digital sales rooms for
Yeah.
founding AEs, and like, the header and the subhead, right? Then it's a prompt, right? Bar. And it's like, put in your transcripts and generate your first follow-up for free, right? And
Amazing.
experience the products right on the homepage, right? And the interesting thing is that Kyle Poyer's post that went out yesterday, I think, the whole thing was the prompt bar is the new front door for products, right? And it showed whether it's Canva or Gamma is another tool out there, right? Or
Yes.
like he showed a couple of examples, all of them have these prompt bars as like the front end of their products, right? And the idea is like immediate value, like put something in, get something out, and then train them on how to use the product, right? So it's kind of like Saas backwards, right? And that was fascinating to see that Dane was kind of a little bit ahead of the curve there. But I do think that we think a lot about that in terms of design now. How do we get users to value as fast as possible and then train them on the other things? And it means enough has to work up front with no setup, right? No training. And then sort of they experience the value. And then then they feel like there's enough value to make it worth going deeper and understanding how to use the product and what else they can do and so on. So yeah, we should include a link because that's a fascinating product design article and a shift that I think is going on right now with these products.
Yes, please help me share that. And I think it's a great thing because it also cleans up your metrics because you get on your email list or in the next step or whatever funnel you have or into the product, people that are actually already invested, already know that they will like the product. And I guess they'll stick around in percentages way higher than if you were to show them the product after whatever wizard or sign up a flow that you may have. So that's pretty interesting. Please share the link. Yeah, let's
Yeah, one
spread
thing
the
you
word around.
mentioned, yeah, you mentioned like the interactive demo, I think, on our previous, like on the AssetMule page. And that was kind of like a little bit of an inspiration in it as well. I feel like we've gone through an evolution in sort of marketing and design where um, you would go to a website in the past and it would be text and images, right? And then this idea of like videos, like demo videos, and you can see a demo video. Then the next stage was interactive demos, right? Now you can see like an actual click through and you can get a kind of a click and feel of the product. Now the next one is actually like making the front page like the product where
The
you can actually
product.
experience it, right? And there's both advantages to it. There's also challenges to it. You need to make sure that the value is delivered consistently. And then also, unlike previous sort of from a marketing perspective, you might not know who the user is when they use the product, right? You have to capture their information at some point, but instead of it being like sign up for a free trial or sign up for a demo and you have their information immediately, and you may even have like questions about like, are you a
Right.
salesperson? Are you a marketer? And
Yes.
like you kind of have to like give them value first and then get that information later. It's again a lot talked about in that article and a lot of stuff that we're thinking about now, so interesting times.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's incredibly smart. Yes, very interesting. I think I have one last small question. When we talk about you are planning to invest more into design because design is important, and we talk about the different aspects. We talk about there's a branding, marketing side. There is two sides of the product design because one is the AssetMule creates visual assets. So someone needs to design beautiful assets. They look polished and high quality. And then you need someone to take care of the continuous development of the product in terms of UI and user experience. And as the product becomes more complex, then you do build this ecosystem of micro apps. Complexity is going to increase probably exponentially. And then UX and design become even more valuable. So when you think about all these needs that you're gonna have in the future, do you see yourself hiring someone and getting on your team someone internal, hiring external contractors or
Yeah.
a professional expert? How do you see that working for you?
Yeah. Internal versus external. I'm not quite sure yet. I think from a brand side, external is probably the way to go, right? Because I think we have a good foundation and it's more about the decision there to bring on an additional resource would be more about freeing up, let's say, Dane's time, where like a portion of his time is supporting me with brand elements and assets so
Marketing
that I
assets, right?
can move forward on the content side. So I think that's where we would bring on an external resource to start versus bringing on internal. On the product side, like I would want to have a conversation with Dane and figure out what his opinion is on there. I feel like, you know, he does do a really good job, and I think he really enjoys the like time to value UX side of things, right? Like, so I think that that would be something that he'd want to continue to focus on. I think that's like close and dear to his interest and his heart. In terms of where we might invest a resource is more on like the output side. I think that's something that like it's a little bit different than a product designer. It is actually a more traditional asset designer, right? Because that's the, like, they would be guiding him on what to build, but it would be their expertise on like marketing and sales assets, right? And the design of them. So that could be an interesting resource either to bring in-house or bring an external resource to start that then maybe we bring in-house eventually. So yeah, that's the way I think about it. I think like definitely brand, we could use an external resource just to get more going, right? On top of the foundation we've built. And then, yeah, on the product side, probably Dane focusing on the UX and the time to value, and then getting somebody to work with him on up-leveling the game on our external, like the assets that our customers create, right? By thinking about what components, what design elements we can start bringing into those templates that we have, right?
Right. Interesting. Actually, I do have another question. And where is this? How are you funding? How will you be funding your growth? Are you looking for funding or are you self-funding? Is
No,
revenue coming from customers?
Yep. Yeah. So we're bootstrapped. We did raise a little bit of, so I guess we're angel strapped is the new term that people say. So we raised a little bit of money early on just from friends and family, not a lot, right? Small checks. And kind of that's taken us to where we are today. And then now we're living off the revenue of our user base. And our aspiration going forward, at least at this point in time, is not to raise more money. We kind of like, I think I'm not one of those people that believes that it's black and white, right? That you absolutely shouldn't raise money or you absolutely should raise money. I think it really depends on the context of the business. Like it would be impossible to build an LLM without raising venture capital. You know what I mean? In our case, for the type of business that we want to build and the type of lifestyles that we want to live as founders, right? I think the bootstrapping approach or the self-funded approach gives you more
Makes the most
optionality,
sense.
right? Yeah, it means that you don't necessarily have to shoot for the stars, right? You can have a very successful business anywhere in between, right?
Right.
And it also gives us the flexibility to do things that maybe would get pushback from investors, like
Investors.
launching this new follow-up product, right? We were getting traction with the AssetMule product, and we took this sort of leap of faith based on what we were seeing where the puck was going. And
Happening.
sometimes, I don't know, some investors might be comfortable with that and think that's the right move. Other investors might have said, listen, you need to stay on the track and stay focused. You're risking everything by doing that, you know? So again, I do like the flexibility and the optionality that we get from staying sort of self-funded. And again, the other thing that I think is a major question is the lifestyle, right? Like, what are you trying to build here? Do you want to build a unicorn or do you want to build something else? And we've always felt that, like very early on, George, Dane, and I had said that we want to build for freedom. And what we mean by that is the freedom to build what we want for who we want, with the people that we want, in the way that we want, and to enjoy what we're doing. And I think that, you know, the approach that we're taking with the self-funding is most optimal for that sort of a lifestyle, I think.
Amazing. Allow me, well, if you will, allow me a personal question.
Yeah,
Because you're a father to two
yeah.
beautiful children, 8 years old and 4 years old, how does that impact the way you think about your startup, your future, your vision for this lifestyle that you want your startup to enable?
Yeah, huge influence on it. Because I would say before I had kids, back when you knew me at Tracker, right? In the early days, I always wanted to start a company. I always wanted to be a founder. And I would say my aspirations were very different. I would have like wanted to build the unicorn, right? I would have wanted the venture backed, high growth sort of lifestyle. That's what I would have wanted, right? Back then, it's what I dreamt of. As you have kids, your priority changes, right? And I think that like what I want in life is different, right? It's more about like building something meaningful, having the flexibility to be able to work from home, be here when my kids get home, drive them to like guitar practice or whatever, if I need to. And also to show them that like, you can build your own career, right? And that you can balance, being a father with being a founder. It's still a challenge. It's not like you know, easy to balance the two, but I feel like, again, it gives you a lot more choice, right? A lot less pressure from the external people, resource, or things. So I definitely think that like being a father and having kids and more priorities than just like your career and what you want to achieve in your career shaped the way that I think about building the startup that I'm building now versus what I would have wanted to build when I was pre-kids.
Let's stay on this for one more minute, because I would assume, and projecting on you my own fears when it comes to kids and families.
Yeah.
I would assume there's an aspect of another kind of pressure, that is providing enough and
Yep.
having enough for the future.
Totally.
So solidity, stability, some kind of abundance that, at least in a very limited way of the word, it comes from at least in our culture, it can only come from the hustle, from not having time, from being busy all the time. So how do you manage to balance that with wanting to have more time to spend with your kids and building a balanced lifestyle, thanks to the startup that you're CEO?
Yeah, it's a tough question. And I don't think I'd be lying if I said I do an amazing job at it. You know what I mean? Like I do the best that I can do and I'm learning. I think everybody is. And I've heard others speak similarly about it, right? Listen, like I think it's a question I ask all the time of myself. And I think most founders would as well, right? Like, am I being selfish here in building something? Because, sure, like if I went and worked at another company, I'd probably be earning more money than I'm earning right now, right? And I'd be able to like, be a little bit more flexible in some things that my kids want to go to dinner, a couple of times a week outside, right? Or like we want to go on vacation to more places and stuff like that. And fortunately, I'm in a position where I can provide a lot of those things, but not like excessively. And like, if I did work for another company, like a much bigger company and a more senior role and all those things, I wouldn't have to think twice about that stuff. So there's definitely the question that I ask all the time is like, I try and tell myself that what I'm doing is also inspirational to them and they can see that like you can work hard for something and you can build something of your own, all those things. But there's also the other side of the coin where you're like, am I being selfish? Is that like a cover for being selfish, that I want to work on this thing and build this thing and so on? So that's a constant battle that I think I face. And I'm sure it's not unique to me.
Unit.
And then, in terms of spending time with them and working on stuff, I think I've done a really good job. Like I've tried to, right? It's not perfect, but I do try to. I'm not one of those founders that like doesn't stop for dinner time with the kids and like bath time and getting them to bed. Like I do. I started, I help them get ready in the morning and then they get off to school and then I get started. And then when they come home, like at 5 or 6, I pause and I do dinner time with them and I do bath time and I do bedtime. And then on the weekends, I try and work as little as possible too. So I try and be there fully present with them on the weekends, right? Because that's our time together, right? If they have days off school for one reason or another, I try and take days that align with that off and be with them. So I think I do a pretty good job at it. And, the key is to in a way, I think it actually does push me to be more diligent with my time when I am working. I know I have this like block
Great point.
between 8 and 6 where I really need to get the right things done. So I think there's actually a forcing function on that side. I know there's a lot of people that talk about, I don't know, these new trends like 996 or whatever it is. I don't know if that's the right the right term, but I don't really follow that stuff. I just try and make sure that like I'm present with my kids when they're here and when it's time to be present. And I use that actually as a forcing function to be really diligent about what I get done when I can get done. And again, not being a venture-backed founder gives me the flexibility to do that and not feel bad about it, right? Because in the
Yes.
end, I'm not answering to other people, or I'm not I guess, responsible for the investments that they made and all that kind of stuff. It's all about like, you know, how much, you know, the outcome for me and for Dane and for George. And I think we're very aligned on that as well. We take a very balanced approach. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but it's a
100%.
constant like battle, and you can always get better, and you're always, sometimes you get pulled in more and then you realize you need to go back to center. But that's kind of the line that I try and walk as a founder and father.
Sounds like you're doing it right. You are taking advantage of the freedoms that this kind of endeavor that you started allows. So yeah, well done, concern for from my point of view. And with that, I'm complete. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you for being so generous with your insights, whether they're personal or about your business. And I wish you all the luck and success you deserve. And I will sure be in touch. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet me today, Justin.
Yeah, no, this was fun. And, as I said throughout this, design is such an important part of any company, how they present themselves, how they engage with customers and support customers. So I love the fact that you're talking to founders and surfacing these topics and these things, and sort of, making it a topic, right, that people are really focusing on, in terms of like how you can bring design into various elements, and getting designers to think differently as well by getting these non-designers to talk about what design means to them. It's really important. So kudos to you. I'm going to be a big
Thank you.
follower of this.
Thank you so much. I am learning a lot. I am getting so much out of this call, these calls, that even if I were not to publish them and for nobody to see it, they would have done their jobs. So thank you so much for saying that.
Absolutely.
It's a privilege for me to have you as my supporter in this too. Thank you, Dan. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Justin. Good luck with everything.